Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to round 4 of the AROC Racing League's Touring Car Championship for the second half of 2024. We're here this evening at the Circuit of the Americas, COTA. We'll be visiting this week in the world of Formula One. Next week, of course, in the titles FAO Ones, our single-seater championship as well. And we're on board at the moment with Colin Knief. No, completely wrong there. We're on board with Colin. Nope, we're on board with Matt Daly now. Back on board with Colin Knief, though. As we see him, the back ends on his car actually stepping out ever so slightly through the past couple of corners. One big corner to go, though, before we have the long back straight. And he's actually looked like he was on a decent time there, but the timing system seems to have a bit of a wobble. Okay, so we'll ignore that for now then. Either way, at the moment, it's David Shelley currently on pole once again, just like in the previous fortnight's race, on the super soft compound of tyres, pushing him through qualifying. 2 minutes 16.4 for David there. Meanwhile, Colin, 2 minutes 16.42 on the soft compound of tyres. So slightly harder wearing tyre might offer a bit more performance later on into the lap, but also might set up Colin a little bit better for the race coming up in a little while when he got a bit more experience on those harder compound tyres. This track, I suspect, will be pushing the tyres fairly hard. There's some high-energy corners, some high-speed corners, multiple parts of the lap, actually, which really do push the tyres, even in a Formula One car, but especially in something like a touring car here, where you haven't got the out-and-out downforce of a single-seater, but also the front axle is doing all of the work. It's putting all 340 turbocharged horsepower to the road, and it's got to try and steer the car and brake the car as well. So with 6 minutes to go into this session, let's see what Colin Knief can do as he tries to negotiate that tyre management as he jumps onto the start-finish straight before the big run up, the massive elevation change into that first corner. What a spectacle that first corner is. It's always a bit worrying when you see a Tilcadrome. We see a modern track that sometimes you think it's going to be a bit gimmicky, isn't going to work, but COTA is, I think, a pretty marvellous circuit. It must be said, this corner offers many overtaking opportunities, so many different ways of approaching this odd corner before you drop back down into the second corner. And then you have a section of the track inspired by Maggots Becketts that run through the halfway point of the Silverstone circuit where we were just last week, and of course a fortnight ago as I accidentally adjust the boost pressure of the 75. And it's a bit more of an extreme example of Maggots Becketts, shall we say. It's a bit more kind of squirmy and squirrely. It darts across a little bit more, but it's still fun nonetheless. Run through now into the second sector before we have another heavy braking zone into turn 11 before the speed gets really quite high now. The run down towards turn 12 in just a moment. There's a speed trap at the end of the straight here. The speed trap doesn't always seem to work in qualifying, but usually picks up in the race, so we should see some of that, hopefully. And you have that heavy braking zone as well. A real overtaking opportunity there, and also a real opportunity to run a little bit wide and find yourself not quite where you'd want to be out on a track. Let's see how Colin Knief negotiates this now. A little bit of a lock up there from the back axle. It's so easy to lock up the back axle in this car. It wants to, all the weight shifts away from that back axle, of course. It's really just there to kind of keep the car propped up on four wheels, really, especially in situations like that. I suppose at least it's semi-trailing arm on a Juliet. In a Mito, you'd be just a good old torsion beam. It really is a simple thing in a Mito, but a bit more complicated here in this Juliet WTCR. An improvement through the middle sector there for Colin. A fairly long middle sector up this lap. In fact, a fairly long lap overall, of course, over 2 minutes. So we won't be seeing too many laps, probably about 12, 13, maybe 14 laps all in all in the race as the back end on Colin's car really stepping out. We've seen this on a couple of occasions here in qualifying so far. The back end seems very lively in Colin Knief's car. Now, what that's going to offer him is quite a good bit of turning, and the car's going to be really eager to go for those corners, attack those apexes, and maybe open up a few more overtaking opportunities for him. But on the other hand, it's going to be a bit more of a handful throughout the rest of the race, so he's going to have to navigate that well. I think Colin is up to the task, though. Hopefully we won't have a repeat of what happened through Chapel at Silverstone last week. Sorry, Colin, hate to bring it up, but it was certainly a sight to behold. We're gonna say it was my fault, because I said he hasn't put a foot wrong in the first race, then he had the off at Chapel, and then in the second race, right at the very end, I said, surely he can't repeat this incident at Chapel, and then it happened again. So we're going to hold myself accountable for that one, but I'm sure we won't see any more of that in this race. And that was a very nice lap last time around for Colin Knief. Sees him currently on provisional pole at 2:16.2, 1.5 tenths faster than David Shelley's previous attempt, and there's a nice gap there down to Andy Craker at 2 minutes 17.6. And then P4, it's Alan Matthews to 18.3, Matt Daly to 18.3 as well. Matt Daly not progressing through this session in the way that he would have liked or we usually expect. And then we also have Guy Swarbrick has posted a time. I do believe he is racing this evening, but hasn't been able to really put a fast one in this session. It shouldn't affect him all that much, really, as we head into race one. So let's see what he can do, as Jack Hodson also makes it out on track as well. So should be getting a time from him in the very near future indeed. We're still on board, though, with Colin Keneath. Doesn't improve through the first sector. We're into that heavy Sector 2 braking zone once again. The delta is looking good. You can see that delta in the bottom left-hand of your screen, ladies and gentlemen, although you can see that. It's currently predicting a 57-minute lap. I can tell you, I promise you, it's not a 57-minute lap, unless it's going to be really quite slow through Sector 3. He's currently looking about 0.2 of a second up on his previous best. So that is what Colin Keneath is aiming for at the moment, which would, I think, cement him quite nicely in a decent position for pole here, although David, I suspect, is going to be fighting back for it. It's lost out through the first sector, so it won't be on this run around. We should have another attempt, another fast lap attempt in the bank here. That 2 minutes left on the clock, and it's 2 minutes 16 lap. So where is David? He's currently running down into turn 12 himself, so we will have another fast lap attempt to try and push towards Colin Keneath. But as it stands, Colin is looking good. We're back onto the start-finish straight once again before that huge elevation change into the first corner. I'm going to keep pressing the wrong button this evening by the looks of things. And then we cross the line. Colin Keneath does improve very nicely. And oh, there's the speed trap. That's not where you should be. No, go down there. Great. Thank you. There we go. All organised and put together here. Very well indeed. All professional. As you know, what more could you expect from Reeve? Anyway, that was looking good there for Colin Keneath. It did lose out ever so slightly through the third sector, so it was at 2 minutes 16.3 in the end, but still nice and consistent, still decent laps there from Colin, showing that he's looking good on pole for the time being. Meanwhile, let's have a look at Andy Craker. He's currently running in the 2 minutes 17 region, is looking a little bit slower on this lap as well. Where is he? He is currently heading through Sector 1 himself. The back end looking very uncomfortable there. It goes flying around. As that's a little bit confusing. That's Colin Keneath's livery there, Andy Craker's car, so we'll remember that one. As he does manage to keep it pointing in the right direction, but certainly scrubbed off a bit of time in doing so. Jack Hodson crosses the line. It doesn't register on the game, but I can tell you his last lap was a 2 minute 20.2. That sees him currently P6 in this session. Guy Swarbrick isn't being classified according to the timing system. But let's see what Jack can do with the remaining part of this session. I also want to watch out for Matt Daly as well. 2 minute 18.3. Not the type of laps we'd usually expect from Matt Daly, and he has gone personal best through the first sector here. So are we going to see a real charge now from Matt Daly? Let's see what we've got. No predicted time. The game hasn't had enough data from Matt to really put together an idea as to how he's going to complete the lap. So it's just going to be raw talent out on display, which is what we like to see. All this data gets in the way of things sometimes. At least we have overtaking predictability and all of this nonsense. At least we've just got some nice, lovely times to keep yourselves occupied with. We don't even have that, I'm pleased to say, though. Guy Swarbrick has been able to rejoin the session. So, well, I was about to say he might get a lap in. The checkered flag goes there. So, unfortunately, Guy, no real shout at that, but he's prepared nicely for the race coming up in just a few moments now. As we head through the second sector, Matt Daly loses out a substantial amount of time, actually, as Jack Hodson, David Chelly actually making contact in qualifying. We don't see that all that often, as David is. Both of them are pointing in the right direction, in fact, but that's not something we see very often, especially with 7 cars on the grid on a very large circuit. What does that mean for the race coming up? Let's see, as we head back onto the start-finish straight. As he loses out there, does Matt Daly. That middle sector really letting him down on that previous lap. So P5 in the end for Matt Daly. Guy Swarbrick will be classified as he's been able to rejoin as we go back on board with Jack Hodson, who's got 2 very nice sectors on this lap indeed. 2 very nice sectors there as he goes personal best through both and is looking good to come towards the end of the lap here with a bit of pressure from David Chelly. He actually made contact as we saw, so he does abandon the lap in the end. That is P8 for Jack Hodson. Well, P7. I've not out-qualified Jack. I can tell you that for free. That was a P6 in the end. Actually, Jack Hodson, even under pit lane speed limit, crossed the line there and beat Guy Swarbrick's time. So we'll actually finish ahead. I've not seen that ever, really. That's something new for me. So that is Guy Swarbrick P7, Jack Hodson P6, Alan Matthews currently fighting out for P4, isn't looking like he's going to improve on this lap, although apparently Matt Daly made it across the line just in the nick of time, so we'll see. As Alan Matthews rather crosses the line there, does not improve. It's 218.3. So the question is, with 143 miles an hour through the speed trap this time around, what can Matt Daly do? He does improve through that first sector. It's a 37.8. That is rivaling the likes of Colin Knief, David Shelley, and in beating the likes of Andy Craker and Alan Matthews. So we could be on for a bit. Oh dear, that's a big off there. What has happened? That was into turn 12, too late on the brakes. A disaster for Matt Daly in qualifying. Sector 2 not going his way at all. Could have been a nice improvement there, but it's going to be row 3 in the end for Matt Daly after what was a bitter qualifying for him. A great qualifying for Colin Knief, and it's going to be a good fight between Colin and David as we head into race 1 once again, so don't go anywhere. And here we are on the grid, ready for race one here at COTA. The clock ticking there on the overhead gantry, 25 minutes and 25 seconds until the checkered flag will drop, or the time will hit zero at least, as these drivers are lined up. But it's Colin Knief and David Chelly on the front row. Andy Craker, Alan Matthews the second, Matt Daly, Jack Hodson the third, and Guy Swarbrick rounding out the field. Going to be an exciting one. Touring cars at COTA isn't a traditional pairing, but I'm certainly looking forward to it as the revs begin to rise and the drivers get ready to launch the car. It's 6 red lights on the gantry, and we are away for race one here at COTA. That run up to the first corner could be pivotal, and it's a great launch for Colin Knief there, as he's got a little bit of pressure, but he's got a decent amount of air gap as well. He just needs to take that line confidently. As long as he doesn't wash out too wide, it'll be a good run here. It's a very good run, though, for David Chelly as well, who's gained a little bit of time running through that first corner. Matt Daly making up positions here, gets ahead of Alan Matthews now, puts the pressure on Andy Craker if he can, but in fact, it's going to be Alan Matthews fighting for it back as we run through turn 3, turn 4, followed by turn 5 in very quick succession. And then a bit of a braking zone here, I suspect. Oh, no, actually, these cars will make it through without needing to derate all that much. That's quite impressive there. Usually when you got to the faster Formula cars, you do have to let off just the amount of speed you're carrying in. But as we are heading now into the end of the first sector, actually, everyone makes it through cleanly. That's what we like to see. But David Chelly very much putting the pressure on Colin Knief as we're going to head in to turn 11 before we have that big run. This is a pivotal corner, of course, because you want to bring that momentum on to the straight. And it's a great run for David Chelly there. He doesn't even need the slipstream. He can get the move done before the DRS zone would open if we were in DRS-enabled cars. But what that has done, that has promoted Colin Knief to actually benefit from that slipstream now. He's going to be able to fight back, is Colin. They dart across the straight. It gets very close there before we enter the braking zone, and we make it through turn 12. There's a little bit of contact, but only ever so slight, as that's traditional touring car stuff, really, isn't it? We run through turn 13 and 14 next. Again, very slight contact there. Colin goes slightly wider. David defending with all of his might, and this is actually bringing Andy Craker into the mix, and the back end on Colin Knief's car steps out. We saw glimpses of that in qualifying. The back end not wanting to be on the respond really to the driver's inputs, and we've had another example of it, and it was at a crucial moment for Colin Knief. Now, it's not going to look any different on your screens, really, if you ignore the timing tower, because the number 1 car has just overtaken the number 1 car for P2. But that is a bit disastrous, really, for Colin Knief. Now he's under pressure from his old rival, Matt Daly. And Matt Daly's not going to give up without a fight here, as we see into the braking zone there, into the final corner. Very nice textbook move. I think Colin, though, is going to be able to fight back as we run up into that first corner. That is David Chelly in the lead of this race by 1.5 seconds. Andy Craker putting the pressure on if he can. Matt Daly starting to break away, actually, as we run up into that first corner. Colin Knief seems to be struggling for a bit of straight line speed there, and that's a big incident there. Not quite sure what to make of that one. Matt Daly, my heart goes out to you. Spinning around, pirouetting, and dropping back into the bottom of the field. Are we going to see him continuing? I'm not quite sure. That car's not looking very happy. He is going to be able to try and get it going, I think. That's a very wounded car. That is one Julietta that I would not want to be buying second-hand. As we go back on board with Colin Knief running in P3. That now means Alan Matthews P4, Jack Hodson P5, and Guy Swarbrick P6. As Alan Matthews, I think, picked up a bit of damage from that as well. Now, this is one track, I think, where front downforce, you don't want to be lacking it at all, as we've seen some fairly high-speed corners. Of course, you've got some heavy braking zones as well, where you want some nice balance in the car, and so far what we've seen is some cars coming together at some of these corners, and a bit of issues on the braking, shall we say. So it's going to be an interesting one, I suspect. 6 cars remaining in the session now. David Chelly leading the race and controlling it by 2 seconds. That's a purple first sector on this lap. It's looking good for David. Andy Craker, meanwhile, perhaps not quite expecting to be in this position so early on in the race, having a bit of a lock-up in to the turn 12 left-hander. But that doesn't really affect him all that much. Alan Matthews now into P3. But Jack Hodson, keeping him in check is Jack Hodson. And I should mention, as I always like to have a bit of a chat about tyre strategy, on the medium compounded tyre is Jack Hodson. This could bode well later into the race for him. Now, as we all well know, I am by no means an expert. And in fact, if you're a racing driver in any capacity, and I give you some advice, usually do the opposite and you'll do quite well. But I would suspect that this track, we've seen some fairly high tyre temperatures through some of the corners. You've also got some heavy braking zones there where it's easy to lock up. It's a fairly high energy circuit. That front axle is doing a lot. The medium tyre later on into the race could be a good call. Everyone else is on the soft compound, so it's going to be a bit of... I think Jack Cotton's going to be a bit of a guinea pig, but we might be seeing some decent performance late on into the race from Jack, and in fact, he's going to have a decent battle now, is he? Not quite. It looked like Alan Matthews goes a little bit wide into the final corner, and Jack Austin tries to capitalise on it, but isn't able to, but gets oh so close now as we run it into that first corner. Benefits from the slipstream, can follow his line through that first corner nicely, and then we have the S's coming up next, where it is so easy to overpressure someone who you're trying to overtake. If you just crack a little bit under pressure, one small kind of mistake in line as you run through, say, turn 3 or turn 4 at this circuit can really compromise the whole of Sector 1, maybe even the start of Sector 2 as well. It's a very important chain of corners here. It is impressive to nail in qualifying. Maybe doesn't make for the best racing in the world, does this corner complex, but to nail it in qualifying is oh so satisfying. As we see these two seem to be doing a good job of it here, seem to be keeping each other in check at least, as we head towards the start of Sector 2 now. A little bit of a touring car line there for Alan Matthews, but we'll let that one slide as we run down the long back straight now, where the cars will hit the maximum top speeds of around about 150 miles an hour, using all of those 6 speeds, all of those 1.75 turbocharged litres, 340 horsepower on tap. Jack Otton keeps in the slipstream of Alan Matthews, 0.4 of a second separating these two drivers as we run it into the first corner. Sorry, first corner? 11th corner, 12th corner even. I'll have a quick reboot of my brain. Anyway, I think at this distance, the slipstream is not going to be all of that powerful. It's not like we're in a big, heavy downforce single-seater race car, like a Formula 1 or Formula 2 car. We're in touring cars. They've obviously got downforce. Let's look at the size of the wings on them, but the slipstream effect isn't going to be all that massive. These cars aren't quite as aerodynamically efficient as the likes of a multi-million-pound single-seater car, although they are still very impressive racing machines nonetheless. A bit of a favourite of our drivers, I think, is the Giulietta WTCR. It's been a mainstay for a little while now, and it's certainly it's nice to drive something very recognisable, as we see Alan Matthews still maintaining around about 0.3 to 0.5 tenth of a second gap, builds it out ever so slightly now as we head towards the end of the lap. And we'll see, actually, as he heads through the final corner, where it all went wrong on the previous go-around. This time around, it looks like he's taking a tighter line, and in fact, it's going to be Jack Otton who goes out a little bit wide. Now, just want to have a quick look at the front end of the field. It's David Chelly, who is currently leading and controlling the race well. 4 seconds his lead against Andy Craker now, as he still is setting purple sectors, but the other driver setting purple sectors is none other than Colin Knief in P6 at the moment. Really, things not going his way in this race. Guy Swarbrick P5, Jack Otton P4. We've just been watching that battle just a moment ago. Colin Knief currently running down in P6, but is setting purple sectors. Is going faster than he has at any point in the race so far. Predicted a 2:16.8. Won't quite match the best of David Chelly. That's a 2:16.3 on that previous lap. And David, in fact, is trying to go quicker still. Crosses the line, 2:16.7 there. Nice lap from Colin Knief. Let's see if he's able to continue building this momentum and push towards potentially a podium position later on in the race. We go on board, though, with David Chelly. And it's looking good as things stand. Don't want to commentators curse things, but it's 4.5 seconds ahead of Andy Craker. Goes purple through the first sector once again. There you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of your screens, ladies and gentlemen, is the predicted lap time. A 2:16.2. Looking good there. That's a decent amount of pace, especially this early on in the race as well. I know we have this conversation every week, but we're going to have it once again. It's impressive to see these qualifying matching times early on into the race, because the fuel loads are, while we've had a few laps now for the fuel loads to get down, fuel loads are still relatively heavy, especially at a track like this, where a lot of it is flat out to get these cars up to the likes of 150 miles an hour, around a 2-minute lap. It is a fairly long lap, fairly heavy on the fuel load. So the cars are going to be starting the race quite heavy. And of course, as we've said, high energy circuit as well. The tyres are going to be perhaps not worn out yet. We're only 9 minutes into the race, but certainly not at their best. You wouldn't want to qualify on them, although they will be in a nice window. They will have a nice bit of temperature in them and should be fairly raceable. What we'll see, I suspect, is the times dip off before, as the fuel load gets lighter, the times start to pick up once again. Double purple sector for David Chelly on this lap. Crosses the line, and that is a 2:16.2, building up that gap compared to Andy Craker. Colin Keneath on that last lap, 2:16.7. We'll wait just a little while to see what he can do towards the end of this lap. But there's still battling going on. It is Alan Matthews against Jack Hodson. The gap has built up ever so slightly. So once again, my prediction of I think the medium tyre is going to come good. For Jack's sake, at least, I hope that is coming true, because at the moment it seems to be that the pace delta is starting to expand ever so slightly. He might be able to claw it back, though, later on to the race, as I say. Already about to hit the 15-minute mark remaining in this race. It really does fly by. The sprint races, 6.5 seconds now, that gap between David Shelley and Andy Craig are looking very good indeed. 4 laps down, that is all. It's a long lap here at COTA. And let's have a reminder on this lap as we head down that back straight of how the championship is looking at the moment. So this is actually a very important race for the championship, because as things stand, Colin Keneath is our championship leader with 97 points to his name. P2 is David Shelley with 91. So if the race remains with the current result, which if Silverstone last week was anything to go by, it's certainly not a given, then we're going to see a change in position between David Shelley and Colin Keneath. Matt Daly running in P3 at the moment, 83 points, and he is currently obviously not in this session. So that will be a fair drop for him in this race. Andy Craker should be promoted up quite nicely with that result. Alan Matthews running in P5, 60 points, and then we have Jack Hodson, P6, 56. Paul Millman, P7 in the championship with 42 points to his name, currently suffering with COVID. So get well soon, Paul. Hopefully you are ready to race next week. And then we have Steve Knight, P8 with 27 points. P9, Will Inglis, who's currently having internet issues, so I hope his internet gets well soon, 25 points. And then we have Guy Swarbrick, P10 with 23. So this race will play very nicely into Guy Swarbrick's hand if he is able to continue on in P5. He is currently, I believe, running with pretty much no battery in his VR headset. Guy Swarbrick relies on his VR headset to see the racing, to see things. So it's never ideal if your eyes shut down midway through the race, I find. So hopefully his battery level holds out. That's why we saw him drop out in qualifying. So it is P10 Guy Swarbrick, 23 points, and then we have Alex Smith, P11 with 12 points. So I'm sure, as he does every week, Alex has some excuse as to why he can't be here this evening. It's just a recurring thing now. I think we should have a point tally for the amount of times he's said that. Do some racing, Alex. That's what we want to see. Anyway, the timer is about to hit 13 minutes. It's 8 seconds between David Shelley and Andy Craker. And yeah, things are looking very comfortable indeed for David Shelley as it stands. Because I've accidentally commentated so little of the touring car series this year so far, I haven't seen David Shelley in a proper race leading kind of form, if you will. Last time out at Silverstone, things didn't quite go his way. Ended up in a couple of instances, still some impressive pace, but it just wasn't what I think had been going on so far earlier in the season, where we had a great battle with Colin Keneath. And I'm glad to report that certainly is what we're enjoying here so far. This could be a very pivotal moment in the championship for David Shelley. And of course, it will be full stop, because we're already at the halfway stage of this championship. When we get to the end of this round, we will have completed 4 out of the 8 rounds for the Touring Car Championship. I can't believe how quickly it's flown by. And of course, in a fortnight's time, it will be at Interlagos. Unfortunately, once again, I will not be able to commentate on October the 30th at Interlagos, so I do apologise for that in advance. But should be clear for the remaining rounds of the season. David Shelley has just gone purple sector once again, so the time's still looking very consistent there. This is just adding to the evidence that my idea that the medium tyre might be the ideal race tyre is not looking good. So thank you everyone for once again proving me wrong, as David seems to be able to nurse these soft compound tyres very nicely indeed. Now that could be as a result of multiple factors. His driving style, his setup, the fact that he's had quite little pressure in this race, so he's just been able to look after the car. As I say that, a bit of a lock-up on the back end there, so sorry if that hasn't helped things. Or it could just be that the game is actually, the track is far more forgiving to these tyres than what first meets the eye. Of course, we don't have, unless you're a follower of a lot of the American race series, which just owing to time zones, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, I don't watch as much as I would like to. We don't have all that much background knowledge, at least I don't, of how COTA behaves as a track outside of the world of Formula One. So interesting to see the combination of a European WTCC star and an American all-American race circuit. I do believe it's had more resurfacing work for 2024, of course. Remember back to about 2021 is around about the time that I'm thinking, or 2020 even. They were the track was looking less than healthy, shall we say. It was looking a bit like a roller coaster, and they're constantly making repairs to it. And I believe it's had quite a lot done for this year. This is the 2023 version of the track, I should mention. So perhaps a year back. I did notice actually in the pit lane, it's got the driver symbol for Logan Sargent there, which is not quite up to date anymore. So Logan, if you're looking for something to do on a Wednesday evening, why not try your chances at some touring car action here at COTA if you're missing COTA, just on the off chance. 9 seconds between David Shelley and Andy Craig. I'm going to stop talking about less than successful Formula 1 drivers and have a look at Alan Matthews. 3 seconds the gap between Alan and Jack Hodson. As we see, Jack is certainly keeping the measure of Alan Matthews at this point. I was starting to fear when we saw a bit of drop off earlier on. Would it be the case that the pace is just going to continue to drop off, and we might see Jack Hodson come home in a lonely fourth position? But I'm pleased to report it's a slightly less lonely fourth position because he's keeping the pace, is Jack Hodson, at 2:19.8 on the last lap, at 2:19.9 for Alan Matthews. So not all that much in it really at this point. Are we going to see the time start to go into the medium tyres' favour? I hope so, for my own ego. Anyway, we'll see. Andy Craker, personal best through that second sector there. We've just had a couple of personal best second sectors, actually, so I suspect we're entering that phase of the race now where the times start to improve. Haven't actually had any screen time for Guy Sawbrick yet so far this evening, but he has just gone personal best as well, adding to the possibility that is the case there. He has got some pressure, though, so he's being spurred on. This could be why. 2 seconds behind him is Colin Keneath, our former race leader, pole sitter, of course, and now fighting with Guy Sawbrick here for P5. Less than 10 minutes to go in this race. So we'll see how Guy Sawbrick is able to manage this one coming up. Oh, quite a lot of damage there in Guy Sawbrick's car. I think that's a certain... Oh, that's how Guy Sawbrick manages it. He just decides, and fair enough, just decides, Colin, you head on through. No need to even fight. No need to even add any jeopardy to the situation. Guy Sawbrick's still going to come away from this race with a decent amount of points. He lets Colin Keneath by. That is lovely racecraft. Great to see some sportsmanship here. Would have been nice to have a little bit of a battle, though. A little bit of trading of paint, Robin's racing and all that. Anyway, as we see these two drivers coming towards the end of the lap. Now we are 7 laps into this race. Just under 8 minutes to go in this race now. Still on board with Jack Hodson. He has lost a little bit of time, unfortunately, compared to Alan Matthews. You can add the number of... I don't even want to think about the number of times I've accidentally clicked the turbo button in this session so far. I don't know why it's a thing I've decided to start doing this evening. Anyway, lost a little bit of time has Jack Hodson compared to Alan Matthews, which is a great shame. Also just had a brilliant message from Will Inglis in the paddock, which was... Obviously, Will was having internet issues earlier on, and he says, oh, my ping is now 0 milliseconds. Great. But so is his internet speed, apparently. The internet's completely dead. So, unfortunately, no racing from Will Inglis this evening. But it just goes to show the world of sim racing, it is true to proper real-life racing, of course, because not only, in real-life racing, you never know when you're going to get a mechanical failure. In sim racing, you never know when the equipment is still going to let you down. It's all the same at the end of the day. Might be a Logitech G920 instead of a turbocharger failing or whatever, but it can still happen. 4 seconds now, the margin between Jack Hodson and Alan Matthews. 6 minutes remaining in this race. The times look like they're beginning to slowly creep up as we enter the final few minutes of this race now. Andy Craker is looking quite speedy, though. He is certainly the exception to that rule. 2:16.9 on the last lap. Sector 2 personal best, not only a personal best, but a purple as well. And then Sector 3 personal best as well. So that was a 2:16.9. That is nearly the fastest lap of this race so far. Not quite the fastest, though. That goes to David Shelley, who is running very nicely out in front, 2:16.2, and just needs to focus on cruising this car home now. I should add, you are all so blessed this evening to hear my voice on the stream, because tomorrow, I'm slightly dreading it, completely off topic, I'm heading in for a double root canal, and I've been told to expect serious pain for weeks. So the commentary heading forward might be slightly less enthusiastic, but we shall see. Please do send condolences and probably a lot of hard spirits. I'm thinking that's probably a strategy to solve the problem there. Might not be ideal to take the Alpha to the dentist tomorrow, because it's got the star belt seats, so they like to shake your teeth out as it is, and that might be extra painful. Unless I perform my own root canal and driving around on them before I get there. We'll see. We'll have to take the German, the useless German car, which is less reliable than the Alpha at the moment. 10 seconds at the moment. David Chelly and Andy Craker slowly building this gap up. Has been for quite a while in this race now. And the closest gap we've had between two competitors is Alan Matthews, Jack Otton. Alan Matthews caught up in that earlier race incident. I think just wasn't able to get the car slowed down quick enough. It is so difficult to judge that braking zone heading into the first corner. Matt Daly took a slightly wider line heading into the corner. It was his corner, of course, but taking a slightly wider line in, cut back across the apex, and it was just one of those racing incidents. I think just can't really foresee it, but unfortunately, just too bad kind of scenario built up really and caused that incident. Alan Matthews still running in P3, managed that damage on his front end well. Then, as Guy Swarbrick is, I think, got quite a bit of damage and is just focused on cruising the car home. I think everyone's kind of in this mode in this race now. The large track, we've got 6 cars out on track. Everyone is able to kind of settle into their own comfort zone out on track, find a bit of a rhythm, bit of a groove, and just really nurse the car home. The back end on Alan Matthews' car, they're actually getting a little bit lively heading through turn 3, turn 4, and turn 5, which is what I like to see, at least. I'm sure there's some drivers it doesn't suit their driving style or they don't prefer it, but I always dread seeing a corner complex like that on track when you're in a front-wheel drive car. Those of you who have suffered the default Alfa Romeo Mito QV in Assetto Corsa without any tweaks done to it will know what I'm talking about here. When you're in a car, you know how the car behaves, and you look at a set of corners and you think, that is never going to happen. This car is not going to want to make it around the corner. So it's nice to see, and instead of a bit of understeer, we're actually seeing the cars looking like they're ready to get their elbows into the corner almost. They look quite lively and quite engaging to drive. It's actually, I haven't driven the WTCR Giulietta for got to be at least 18 months now, so I do need to rectify that at some point just to refresh my memory. But I've certainly never done this track and car combination either, so it'll be quite interesting to see how everything is behaving. Just under 3 minutes now in this session, and we have 4 seconds separating the car in P3, the car in P4. Colin Knief is working his way up through the field, but unfortunately just too far down, I think, to make any real headways back towards the podium. It was certainly possible, but I think he had to have another pit stop as well, so not to be in the end for Colin Knief. P5, though, still a good number of points. It will give David Chelly the championship lead, but just makes it all the more interesting in the reverse grid race when we're going to have Colin Knief on the front row, David right at the back, and Colin's going to have to try and flip over that result once again to retake the championship lead. Back end start to get a little bit lively now. I suspect as we approach, we have in fact hit 10 laps completed of this race. The tyres are going to be no longer at their best. The times now, still to be fair, in a relatively raceable kind of condition by the looks of things. It's 218.1, 218.6, 219.4. Highest lap on that previous lap was Jack Otton, 220. And then we have Colin Knief as well on the 216s on the previous lap. So actually, tyre wear, I was completely wrong at the start of the stream. Wrong in qualifying, wrong in the race. Ignore me. Soft compound tyre seems to be working. We'll see, though, as we hit the grid for race 2, if we do have any changes like that. I'm glad it's all not locked in this series. You do see that sometimes where you make one poor decision in qualifying or one slightly misjudged decision in qualifying or at the end of qualifying, and then you have 2 kind of miserable races because of the decision you've made. You can learn in race 1, adapt in race 2, and it makes it more interesting for us as well as we get to see changes in the strategy. We certainly have plenty of that in Silverstone. I don't think we're going to see much of that in Kota, or at Kota rather, but we might see the odd change or two. Who knows? I think we'll certainly see Jack trying to jump onto the softs. Well, here we go. Just over, in fact, 5 seconds left on the clock. And here is our man in the lead of this race. He had a little bit of a fight early on. Colin Keefe had a small error. And from then, it's just been plain sailing as we do now start the final lap of this race by about a second as well. We nearly had a penultimate lap, but unfortunately, it's just one last lap. And it has been a great drive for David Chelly. 91 points to his name and 97 to Collins. But it's going to all change as we're going to see David with the championship lead. Looks like we might have a bit of lag starting to come into play. So hopefully that doesn't affect him all that much on the final lap of the race here as Guy Swarbrick jumps back into P5. So we might have had a change for position here. What has happened to Colin Keefe? Hopefully nothing too major. Not too sure, but it's a bit of an issue by the looks of things for him. He's dropped back and down into P6 once again. Either way, David Chelly, great drive for him so far. Not put a foot wrong in this race. It's had a brief battle with Colin Keefe in the end, though. It has just been plain sailing for David as he brings it home to add another race victory to his tally. The run, slight downhill run down into turn 11 in just a moment. 1 minute down of this 2-minute 16 victory parade that he is going to be enjoying. Now, I've not quite seen a victory donut from David Chelly yet, so are we going to get any in race one? Let's find out as we head down that back straight once again. 150 miles an hour, the top speed that he has posted for 11 laps here at Kota, most of them in the lead of the race as well. Meanwhile, in the rest of the field, we've still got people improving their times, actually. Alan Matthews setting personal best. Guy Swarbrick second personal best. Of course, he has jumped leapfrog Colin Keefe back into P5 for Guy Swarbrick, so this will be a good result for him as he tries to climb his way through the ranks. But let's see, as David Chelly, I think Colin Keefe's had another off as well. He's back in the pits by the looks of things, or is stuck somewhere. Not quite sure what's gone on, but it's David Chelly who has turned 16, 17, and 18. Two last corners rather, to negotiate here. Just have a quick look, actually. That's a disaster for Colin Keefe. I think his engine's run out. I think he's run out of fuel. Or he's had an engine failure, or he's run out of fuel. Either way, a bit of disappointment for Colin Keefe. But there is a contrasting shot, if ever I've seen one. Despair for Colin Keefe. Victory for David Chelly as he crosses the line to take the race one victory. That is a show of force from the car in the red and white there. As we have Colin Keefe coming home in P6. He was able to get back underway. Not sure what's gone on there. Either way, it is Andy Cracker who will come home. Oh, Andy Craker, sorry, who will come home in P2 on the soft compounder tyre as well. Nice comfortable race for him. Tried to challenge for P1. In the end, it was going to be P2, but still a good drive, good haul of points as well. Alan Matthews then will be coming home to round out the podium. A great drive for Alan as well. A bit of an earlier incident, but racing incidents do happen. Can't be avoided sometimes. Comes home P3 to round out the podium. Then we have, I don't think he had any fuel left. And then we have Jack Hodson will be coming home on the medium tyre. He tried it. It didn't look like it worked out in the end. Let's see, though, as Jack brings it home in P4. And then we have a very small wait there for Guy Swarbrick, who'll be coming home in just a moment. But Colin Keefe, I'm really wondering what's gone on here as we see our front runners bringing the car home after their impressive drive here at Kota so far. And I'm pleased to report we're going to have more of it in the reverse grid race coming up in just a moment. The fortunes are flipped, if you will. The front runners head to the back. Those at the back get a chance out at front. So we'll see what happens in the race coming up. But let's see, as we have Guy Swarbrick will be coming home in the top 5 as well, adding quite a decent number of points to his tally so far. And that is our whole field coming across the line here at the end of race 1. We'll catch you in a few moments as we get ready for race 2, the reverse grid race. And welcome back to the action, ladies and gentlemen. We're ready on the grid for race 2, the reverse grid race. Our order is Colin Keefe, Guy Swarbrick, the front row, Jack Hodson, Alan Matthews, the second, Andy Craker and David Shelley, the third. And we have Matt Daly behind there as well. I should add, you might hear some red from Colin Keefe's car. That is because he is having throttle issues. He was suffering them all race, so good on him to bring the car home in the end. Tried to reset it, it didn't work, so we'll see hopefully if he gets some full throttle now and is able to compete properly. But the revs begin to rise, so that is sounding good. We are going to have 6 red lights on the gantry as these drivers get ready to launch these cars away. And we are away for race 2 here at COTA. It looked like that was very close to an early start for Colin Keefe, but he just about made it through. It was, in fact, a very good launch there. He's got a bit of pressure from Guy Swarbrick, though. He's going to take the inside line. Breaks a bit earlier, though. It's Colin Keefe in the lead. He runs wide, though, through the first corner, followed by Jack Hodson, as that is now Colin Keefe, Guy Swarbrick, Jack Hodson are top 3 in this race. Guy Swarbrick on the defence here. This is exactly what Colin Keefe needs as Andy Craker can't find a way past Guy. This allows Colin to try and build up a bit of a gap there. That is a big off for Alan Matthews, though. He is able to recover the car and will continue on. Andy Craker, meanwhile, has lost positions. Guy Swarbrick's looking a little bit out of shape as we run through turn 6, turn 7, and turn 8. As we have David Shelley now up into the second position in this race. Now, that is not going to be music to Colin Keefe's ears. Apologies for the lack of engine audio. It looks like we've had another issue with that, so I do apologise for that one. I mean, I can try and make the impressions for you if you'd like. But so far, a fairly chaotic start to this race, but it's Colin Keefe leading from David Shelley and Andy Craker are top 3. As we see David Shelley getting a little bit upset there as he rides over the curb, heading through the final corner. He is able to keep things pointing in the right direction now. Notice a change in the weather. We'll discuss that in just a moment. Apologies for the lack of engine audio once again. Seems to be a recurring issue with an OBS update, so I'll try my best to get that sorted in the near future. But it's Colin Keefe still leading this race, so his full throttle issues looking very much resolved at this point. It's Colin Keefe leading David Shelley, Andy Craker, Jack Hodson, Guy Swarbrick and Matt Daly. Alan Matthews gunning the rear there. Good to see him getting back underway, actually, given that earlier incident. Matt Daly looks like he's had a bit of an incident as well on that previous lap, as the others seem to be in the mix there, as we have people trading personal best and purple sectors all over the place. It's going to be a great race, especially for the battle for the front end of the field. Now, in terms of the weather conditions, we are operating with real-life weather conditions. So as it stands at the moment, where we are in Austin, Texas. Now, they're a few hours behind, so they're in the midst of the day. They're heading to winter, of course, but still it's Texas. It's 21 degrees, 22 degrees track temperature, which is actually quite low for COTA, I am sure, but still, it's a nice, green, raceable track. But it looks like the weather's turning ever so slightly there. You can see clouds in the background. What's that going to mean? Well, there is, of course, the threat of rain. I doubt we're going to see a change within the session. But also, track temperatures might begin to dip ever so slightly as ambient dips with it. So we could be seeing some change in how the tyres respond there. Speaking of the tyres, we do have every driver on the soft compound tyre now. Jack Hodson, our only runner on the medium previously, he's gone for the extra grip at the start of the race, as it looked like the soft was able to make it home without any real issues. Only a few tenths, though, separating our 2 race leaders as we jump on to the next part of the lap. Sector 3, 15, 16, 17 and 18 all come in quick succession, rather. It's all one big corner, though, really. One big corner, which probably more than any other corner on the circuit really stresses that front left tyre to its absolute limit. It's an anti-clockwise circuit, but it's the front left that is really pushed through turn 18. It's a bit weird in its nature in that sense. But as you run through from 15 to 18, you're pushing some serious speed. You're wide open throttle, and you're using a lot of the steering lock there, and it can really push that front axle. Under the slipstream then is David Jelly. A few tenths of a second still separating them on that last lap. It's a 2:17.1, David in the 2:16s, but I believe that time was not counted due to track limits. Let's see what these two can do in the midst of battle. Also enjoying a battle at the moment are Alan Matthews and Guy Swarbrick. Guy Swarbrick losing a few positions, but doesn't look like he's got damage early on in the race, so should be able to try and get some decent laps in at least as we head later into the session. It was earlier on in this race where we saw it all had already all gone wrong for Colin Knief. Back stepped out at him at the very start, and then he had all those throttle issues as well. Things looking up, it must be said, for Colin as it stands, but things looking good for David Shelley in the championship as well. We'll have a look at that in a moment, but let's enjoy this battle between our front runners. Of course, as they continue to battle each other, let's not count out Andy Craig, a podium in race 1, and currently as it stands, running for a podium in race 2. Because he's in the mix there, certainly. He's not quite got the pace of the two front runners at the moment, but all they need to do is slow each other down in the midst of battle or even have an incident. We've seen these two have a bit of an incident in the previous round at Silverstone, so I'm sure it's certainly not off the cards to see that once again between these two. I don't want that to happen, but I'm sure Andy Craig might be thinking that could be ideal for him in the similar liveried black, orange and white liveried Halford car there. Hunted down, of course, by the boosted motorsport livery of former Andrew Whitehead usage, the white and red Giulietta of David Chelly. A second now separating them, so Colin Knief has picked up the pace on this lap. David potentially pushing a little bit too hard, whereas Colin's setting personal bests. That last lap was, in fact, his best lap, and it's only looking like it's going to get better, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. 2:16.3 is the current predicted time for Colin Knief on this lap. Gap still staying at 1 second, although the times are looking good. In fact, looking really impressive at this phase of the weekend. At 2:16.3 on that last lap for Colin Knief, for 2:16.5 for David Jelly, 2:16.9 for Andy Craker as well. Then we have a few more drivers in the 2:19. So these front three really pushing each other along very nicely. David actually set a purple sector through that last lap, whereas Colin was just consistent throughout the lap. He's looking to change that though on this lap. Goes purple towards the end of sector 1. We run through turn 8 in just a moment before we head back onto turn 9. Slightly switches back on itself, does it? It's a very deceptive set of corners, is that part of the lap. They don't look relatively simple. They look fairly simple. You think, oh, just a left, just a right, but then it's all about chaining it together, and some of the angles you have to approach some of the corners, and particularly I think the likes of turn 6 through to turn 8 and turn 9, where you've got that little switch back against the end of the right-hander, if this is making sense. I'm trying my best, but I'm clearly not very good at what I do. Anyway, we still have a bit of pressure being put on Colin Knief by David Chelly. 8 tenths of seconds separating each other. The slipstream effect is going to be pretty much null and void at that distance, but Colin is still pushing on nicely, and David is very much keeping him in check. Of course, David has that experience of what it is like to lap at the front end in the race in the Giulietta here at COTA. Colin is picking that up as he goes. He's a very quick learner, very capable though is Colin, so I'm sure there's no major kind of challenge for him as we run through that long sweeping right-hander once again. Expecting around about 11-12 laps to be completed in this race, currently on lap 3, 16 minutes to go on the clock, and it's looking very close out front, also looking quite close in the midfield as well. Jack Hodson, Matt Daly. In terms of the pace at the moment, Matt Daly's in the 2:18s. That last lap was invalid. Jack Hodson also in the 2:19, so not that far behind at all. That soft tyre working well then for Jack Hodson. But it's the battle on screen that we want to look at as we run towards the first corner once again. David ever so slightly faster on the previous lap. Not too much though to make any real odds as we head into the first corner once again. The first corner where it went very wrong for Matt Daly on the last lap, went fairly wrong for Colin Knief as well this first part of the lap. Things looking much more in control. The reverse grid race then providing a fairly chaotic lap 1, but seemingly looking like everyone's having a much better time of it out on a track here for race 2 as we head through turn 4, turn 5, coming up on turn 6 now. You can just see, as I was discussing in race 1, how eager Colin's car looks to try and rotate around the back end, just gliding nicely into the corner. I'm sure it might be costing a little bit of time here or there. That could be how Colin likes the car set up, and certainly how I like the car to behave out on track. That I'm a good racing driver at all, or even a good driver in a sim, of course. Hence why I talk about it, don't perform it. I don't take part, I just simply talk about it because no one wants to see that. Anyway, 7/10 of a second separating David Shelley and Colin Knief. Equal on the previous lap. Looks like they could very well be equal on this lap as well. The delta is looking very close as we run it down into the heavy braking zone for turn 12 once again. Like to mention as well, very fair play to Alan Matthews, who in the panic has come out and said complete apologies. He takes the blame for the incident in race 1. I don't think it was the most avoidable. It was one of those incidents where it'd been set up a few seconds or even a second or so beforehand and just became unavoidable at that point. It is, if you had to probably lean on whose fault was it, you'd have to maybe say Alan, as Alan has fully put his hands up and said, sorry, my fault. So fair play, Alan. That's what we like to see. That's great sportsmanship. What we get here in the AROC Racing Leagues, everyone is very fair, very kind to each other. So well done, Alan, for that one. I'm sure Matt Daly it'll be water off a duck's back, really. I mean, Matt has got so many podiums and race wins to his name. He's going to have plenty of opportunities for more as well. He's probably enjoying the challenge of working his way through the field here. Still got some points to pick up as well in this race. Battling out for P4 at the moment as we see our front runners still continuing their battle for the race lead. Jack Hodson then runs up towards the first corner. Just in the background in the rearview mirror, you can see Matt Daly. 2 seconds separating these two drivers, so the gap expanding ever so slightly. Go back on board with David Shelley and Colin Knief as they run through the first corner once again. Gap remaining fairly consistent as it has done for so long in this battle. That's the thing when you've got two drivers together who are known for well, I know Colin very well for his consistency. David, you're new to the championship, so welcome. It looks like you've had a great time of it so far. But as we saw from race 1, David looked very consistent indeed. So I think we're just seeing two drivers who are just happy looking after the car for this race. Really, we have crossed the halfway point in this race. David's going for a slightly tighter line as we head into turn 15. Could this be the challenge beginning to brew now as Colin goes slightly wider, perhaps pushing the car a bit further out than he would have wanted as we run now through a long sweeping right-hander towards the end of the lap. That gap now dropping down to half a second. The predicted time at 2:16.1 for David. Another lock-up there for Colin Knief to 2:16.5 for Colin, but David's car looked rather unsettled heading through turn 19 there, so we could be seeing that the momentum shift slightly back towards Colin Knief now as it looked to be under threat for just a brief moment there. David crosses the line. We're back up to 0.8 of a second this gap. This is going to be very tit for tat, this battle, I suspect, as we do have Matt Daly getting past Jack Hodson, heads through turn 19. Made it look easy, I suspect, as we exited turn 18. There's a decent gap between them already. That is Matt Daly up into P4 now as we head through Sector 1 once again with our two front runners. Now, 10 minutes to go in this race already. We are over half race distance. Let's have a quick look at the championship after race 1, as we're not going to. There we have Throttle issues potentially for Colin Knief. That is a bitter shame for what was so far shaping up to be a brilliant battle. Colin Knief just had to move out of the way. His car very much losing pace. Move out of the way and let David on through. That's not what he would have wanted, I suspect. As now we do have David in the lead of this race, already by 3 seconds. And just consistency is key. That's what we're seeing here. He's been able to capitalise on the misfortunes of others with Colin's very unfortunate issues there. Heart goes out to Colin. He was doing an impeccable job of leading this race, responding to the charge from David Jelly. And unfortunately, 15 minutes into this race, his throttle sensor giving up the ghost once again. What was I saying in race 1? Mechanical issues still happen in sim racing. I really feel for Colin Knief in this one. He drops down to P3. He's going to lose a couple of positions as well. He's, I suspect, trying a throttle reset at the moment. That's why his car's lost so much pace. That'll be like a calibration reset. I'm not quite sure what brand of pedal box he is using. If it's anything like the Fanatec that I use, occasionally it can have a bit of a wobble. It's just such a shame that's happened after all the practice, all the preparation, all the qualifying. It happened in the actual race event. As Colin now down in P6 because we've had quite a close field this race. In just that one, he's lost 5 positions. He's able to continue on. He might challenge Alan Matthews, which is probably going to make Alan Matthews' race a bit more intense all of a sudden. He's had fairly plain sailing after the start of the race as Alan Matthews, and now finds himself with Colin Knief behind, which is a position that no one, I suspect, ever really envies. Either way, Colin, unfortunately, that is just racing sometimes, down to P6 for Colin Knief. David Chadley then a 10-second lead in this race. After all is said and done, looking good for David as it did in race 1, as I was just about to discuss the championship. What I was going to say was David Chadley currently leads the championship now after race 1. Won out against Colin Knief, of course. He leads by 11 points. It's Colin Knief in second with 105 points, but that gap is only going to expand at the halfway point in this championship. This is a crucial race, a very important round. This could make or break the championship. Good round 4. This is pivotal, really, as we approach the halfway stage, and David Chadley capitalises on both races, really, is able to build that points gap up, should have a bit of more comfortable margin, should have near enough, makes no difference, a race victory's worth of points under his belt now, so he can afford to not be present for a race. That, in effect, really for the next round, if that was to be the case. And he goes purple sector as well on this lap. As we get to that phase in the race where the fuel load is lighter, there's still some life left in the tyres. The drivers can push on for one last real charge before they focus on nursing the car home. It's David in the lead of this race, lead of the championship as well. Colin Knief in P2 in this championship, P6 in the race, 105 points to his name. Then we have Matt Daly, P3 in the championship and P3 in the race as well. 89 points to his name. He jumps ahead of Andy Craker, who will actually change back if things stay the way that they are and take back third in the championship. Alan Matthews then P5 in the championship, P5 in the race as well. Look at the congruity that we've got. That's not even a word, Reeve. Don't even attempt to pretend to be intelligent. Either way, it's P5 in this race, but it might not be P5 for long because we've got Colin Knief hunting him down, so we'll stay on board for this one as we head down towards turn 12. But it's Alan Matthews, 75 points to his name, running in P5. Then we have Jack Hodson, 68 points to his name, running in P6. Paul Millman, who we discussed, not here this evening, P7, 42 points. Guy Strawberry, P8, 33. He's jumped ahead of Steve Knight and Will Inglis, who are P9, P10 respectively. And then we still have Alex Smith, who just can't be bothered to turn up. Clearly, that's all it is. Now, of course, real-life commitments do get in the way sometimes. I'm very much guilty of it. We've only had 2 rounds of this series stream so far this season, so I do apologise for that one. As we do have a great battle going on here between Alan Matthews and Colin Knief, running through the long right-hander at the end of the lap before the second DRS detection zone. Not that it makes any difference here in these cars. Into turn 19 in just a moment. Colin Knief might be looking tentatively at that inside line. He's going to be looking at it more so now as Alan Matthews, under pressure perhaps, goes a little bit too wide, carries too much speed into the corner and runs wide off onto the overrun. The drivers, I'm sure, quite happy that the coaster is on those circuits, which just has miles and miles and miles of tarmac runoff. Not unlike the British circuits, or sorry, not like the British circuits where you can go an inch off the track, and especially if it's Alton Park, perhaps one of the greatest Reeve AROC Racing League streaming moments ever. Go an inch off the track and the car just enters a different dimension, really. It just goes onto a different planet. Completely vanishes off the face of the earth. Don't quite have that at Kota here. We just instead have a nice cruise into some more tarmac. Still, that cruise into the tarmac did cost Alan Matthews the position, as it's Colin Knief up to P5. I hope for Colin's sake he is able to bring the car home with the throttle issues he is experiencing. It will be a mighty effort to score a decent number of points if he can do that. With the circumstances, speaking of circumstances, it's good circumstances for David Shelley out in front. 11 points, 11 seconds ahead of Andy Craker in P2. Alan Matthews does get back ahead of Colin Knief. I think further throttle issues once again. I really do despair. This is a great shame for Colin Knief. All he can really do is nurse it home and hope for P6 at this point, but that might be difficult with 5 minutes to go in the race. Bit of disappointment for Colin. Hope he does continue on. I know it will be frustrating, but if he does continue on, it'll be very important points in the championship. So it's Andy Craker P2, 11 seconds down on David Shelley, 11 seconds up on Matt Daly, though. Running in P3 at the moment is Matt Daly, so it will be a good recovery for him. And nice to see him getting a podium in this weekend. Jack Cotton running in P4 then did jump up a position, all things considered, given the change in tyre compound. I'm sure he'll be fairly happy with that one. Then we have Alan Matthews in P5, Colin Knief, and of course we've just discussed running in P6, Guy Strawberry running in P7. Matt Daly then in P3, looking like he could potentially be under pressure from Jack Hodson here. That last lap, a 2:18.5. We saw in qualifying, Sector 2 wasn't working out for Matt Daly. Seems to have got the grips of it now, though. Jack Hodson, though, is putting the pressure on. And Sector 2, just as we mentioned it just then, both drivers a 54.297 through Sector 2. They are equal with that middle sector. All the difference being made elsewhere in the lap then. Matt Daly's found a bit of pace on that lap by the looks of things. They've built up that gap ever so slightly as we enter the final few minutes of this race. Two minutes left on the clock in this race. And David, just as he did in race 1, has control of things at the moment in the 216 still. So these soft compound tyres, my prediction's so wrong in qualifying. I'm pleased I'm wrong. It's nice to see the drivers enjoying a raceable car even late on into the race. We're on board with Jack Godson at the moment. He is still doing his best to hunt down Matt Daly. It seems to be a bit of a game of cat and mouse. It seems to be the case that Matt Daly has a good lap, Jack Hodson might not be able to match, and then Matt Daly seems to have a less than ideal lap, and Jack Hodson's still there to close up that gap. As we see, 0.2 of a second separating Matt and Jack on the previous lap, so the previous go-around was very close indeed. Matt seems to be slightly further away from his best, though, whereas Jack Hodson looking rather consistent. 2:18.4 on the last lap, 2:18.3 being his best overall. It can be really helpful, of course, to have a reference out in front. Of course, Matt Daly is a very good reference, very capable driver. And if you've got that car out in front, you can start to echo the line, start to learn what works out on track and how to best go around the corners there. As we see a bit of back-end slide coming from Jack Hodson's car by the looks of things. I'm entirely surprised if we're seeing some higher tyre temperatures or even a bit of driver fatigue there, kicking in as Jack Hodson goes over the grass. and loses a bit of time there. Of course, not too much time in all things considered, so well done for recovering that. In fact, only lost about 3/10. That's fairly impressive. Is able to continue on. Will have a bit of grass and dirt and detritus on his tyres, so wants to make sure that he is perhaps a little bit gentle into the next braking zone so that the car doesn't continue on into the distance, as that is less than ideal. Just that's the likes of Alan Matthews, how that feels. It's not happy. Alan Matthews, of course, having that issue in qualifying earlier on, as it's a fairly high-speed braking zone there, 150 miles an hour before you stamp on the brakes to try and slow the car down. Now, we are going to have around about 15 seconds left of the lap and 5 seconds left on the clock, so it looks like this is the penultimate lap of this race with David Chelly as he heads on to the start-finish straight. Once again, it will be the penultimate lap now, as we get a bit of deja vu here. It was just one race ago, just over 25 minutes ago, where we saw David Chelly heading on to the final lap of a race with little time to go on the clock, with no real challenge, really. It was easy, he was in control of the race, and he was able to take the championship lead. Now, in this race, he is going to expand it. It has been a great drive, confident drive, a comfortable drive for David Chelly. Slightly helped, of course, by the issues of Colin Knief, more than slightly, if so, but it was going to be a great battle nonetheless. I'm sure we feel a bit robbed of that fantastic battle. I'm sure David feels a bit robbed of the good battle with Colin. I'm sure Colin particularly feels a bit robbed there with those mechanical issues he is suffering. So my heart goes out to you, Colin, but unfortunately it just wasn't to be. Instead, it is certainly going to be a bit of a fairy tale instead for David Chelly, who's had a great drive, as I say. That last lap of 2:17.1, fastest car out on track in the previous lap, has been pretty much fastest all weekend, apart from the small thorn in his side of Colin Knief. In qualifying, Colin had the measure, but in the end, it was that thorn in his side was rather plucked, shall we say, as in the end, unfortunately, it just wasn't to be for Colin. We head down the back straight, though, and David is looking good in terms of pace as well. So 2:16.7 on this lap. Matt Daly is also looking rather strong. It's a personal best sector so far on the final lap. Could be seeing a bit of a corker here from Matt Daly as he builds up that gap to Jack Hodson. Let's go back aboard, though, with David as he heads into the Sector 3 for one last time in this race weekend. It has been a fantastic drive for the car in the red and white. Number 40 liveried car here, as he just needs to nurse the car home now. The car has looked oh so raceable, oh so drivable. You can't really say David's put a foot wrong at all this race weekend. So you'd have to, just on the evidence of we haven't seen enough of Colin Knief, unfortunately, you have to, if we had a driver of the day vote, which we don't have a vote, it's not a democracy, it's just me just declaring it on stream, I think you'd have to give it to David Chelly. He really hasn't put a foot wrong, and he has been rewarded for it. Perhaps, maybe wasn't expecting the reward in race 2, but he's going to get it anyways. He heads around that final corner for one last time this race weekend. Weaves in celebration, I am sure. No, he just brings it home instead. A confident and collected drive there as he brings the car home to take race 2 victory as well. It is a double race victory for David Chelly, just a pole position away from a Grand Slam. Very good result there for David Chelly. And not to be outdone, Andy Craker, a bit of an anonymous race actually, wasn't really involved with anyone, but just as he did in race 1, just quietly brought the car home into P2. It was a great drive in race 1, and it's a great drive in race 2 for the same result there for Andy Craker. And then we're going to have Matt Daly bringing it home in P3. Very close behind actually was P4 Jack Hodson, but it's going to be Matt Daly rounding out that podium in the 3rd position in the end. We have some handbrake action there. Although I made that mistake last time we were in the touring cars. I said it was the handbrake. Apparently, it was just a complete shift of the brake bias. So there you go. I've been proven wrong many times before. I'll be proven wrong again. That is just some lovely drifting skills we have on display now from Matt Daly. I've been distracted by them. It is Colin Knief coming home in P6 in the end. Then we're going to have Guy Strawberry coming home P7 as well, and Matthews brings it home in the top 5 as well. But we do have to get on board with Matt Daly to enjoy some victory slides to round out what has been an exciting weekend here at COTA. In a fortnight's time, you'll see these touring cars heading out at Interlagos. I unfortunately won't be there for that event, so I do thoroughly apologise for that. But in a week's time, you will see some more commentary from myself, if you can endure it, really, at COTA once again, this time in the single-seater Tartus FAO1. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this evening as much as I've enjoyed commentating. I'll catch you soon. Thank you very much for watching, and a good night.